I am Amos Thatcher, an old rancher living alone on this barren land where the wind and my memories are my friends. For 30 years, I have let the world forget me, and I have forgotten the world. But this morning, as the dawn light colored the distant mountains, a little girl walked into my stable, carrying a piece of paper and a ray of light that I thought was lost forever. That little girl, Clementine, changed everything, gave me a reason to live, if only for one day. I sat on the porch, as I did every morning, watching the sun rise. Death was creeping into my bones, like winter frosts that tear at my flesh. I knew I didn't have much time left. The disease had eaten away at my body, and I had accepted it. No one visited the farm anymore. No one cared about a recluse like me. The townspeople called me the madman, the hermit who would rather shoot people than feed them. Maybe they were right. I had built a wall between myself and the world since Sarah and Emma, my wife and daughter, had died of fever 30 years ago. The pain, like a dull knife, cut into my heart every day, leaving scars that would never heal. Today, I was prepared to face death. I sat there on the old wooden chair, listening to the wind whistling through the cracks in the house. Everything was quiet, except for the faint beating of my heart, a reminder that my time was running out. But then, a strange sound cut through the silence. The creaking of the stable door. I was startled. No one came here. Never. My hand trembled as I gripped my rifle, a habit from my days in the wilderness. I was no longer the strong man I had been 30 years ago, but I was still strong enough to defend myself. I walked out of the house slowly, my bones cracking in protest. When I pushed open the stable door, what I saw shocked me. It wasn't a thief or a vagrant. It was a little girl, maybe 11, standing in the middle of the stable, in ragged clothes, her hair tangled with dust and thorns. She held a crumpled piece of paper in her small hands, and her eyes, oh, those eyes, they held a fear I recognized immediately. It was the fear of being alone, of losing everything, of knowing that you were being hunted. I had seen that look in the mirror every day for 20 years. I raised my gun instinctively, but the girl was not afraid. She said nothing, just held out the piece of paper, her hand shaking. I lowered the gun, stepped closer, feeling the pain in my joints. The piece of paper was scrawled in desperation. "Please help Clementine. The bad guys have taken her mother. She can't hear, can't speak. Don't trust anyone in town. They're coming. Clementine." Her name was Clementine. I looked up and saw her staring at my lips, as if trying to understand what I might say. She was deaf and mute, just like the note said. But there was something in her eyes, something that made my heart clench. It was utter loneliness, just like me. She had no one, no place to turn, just this note and the faint hope that an old man like me wouldn't turn her away. I don't know why, but in that moment, something inside me broke. For 30 years of pain, I had locked my heart away, buried every emotion under the dust of this farm. But when I looked into Clementine's eyes, I felt a strange warmth, like sunlight filtering through the cracks of the barn. I didn't just see a little girl crying for help. I saw Emma, my daughter, whom I had failed to save. I saw Sarah, who had held my hand and said we'd get through it all together. But I let them go, and I lived to regret it. The distant sound of hooves pulled me back to reality. Clementine heard it as I did. No, she felt it, in the vibrations in the ground. Her eyes widened with fear, and she grabbed my hand so tightly that I could feel the strength in her small hand. Through the gap in the stable, I saw 3 riders approaching, fast and determined. The leader wore a sheriff's badge, and I recognized him immediately. Deputy Sheriff Wade Langston, the one who had been prowling the area, asking about missing families. A cold feeling ran down my spine. These weren't people coming to help. They were Jew hunters. I didn't have time to think. I acted on instinct, pulling up an old horse blanket and tossing it onto a pile of hay in the corner of the stable. I gestured for Clementine to get under it, and she got the message. She slipped quietly into the hay, out of sight, just as footsteps sounded outside the stable door. Langston entered, his hand resting lightly on his holster, a cold smile on his face. "Good morning, Thatcher," he said, his tone artificial. "Heard you might have seen something unusual this morning." I leaned on my pitchfork, trying to keep my face impassive. "Just saw some policemen on my property uninvited," I replied dryly. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. We're looking for a girl, about 11, black hair, who might be wandering around, looking distraught. Her family had an accident. We want to get her back to her remaining family." The word accident in his mouth made me shudder. I glanced at the haystack where Clementine was hiding, as still as a ghost. She had learned to hide, and that said everything about what she'd been through. "I don't see any kids," I said, my voice flat. "Nobody comes here. I'm dead busy. I don't have time for visitors." Another man, thin and with cruel eyes, sneered. "I heard you were sick, old man. It's a shame you have to die here alone." He exchanged glances with Langston, and I could hear the threat in his voice. "But if you're dead, no one will come looking for you when we search this place." My heart was pounding, but not with fear. It was anger. These men, wearing police badges, preying on an innocent child. I looked at Clementine, hidden under the blanket, and the urge to protect her was overwhelming. I had lost Sarah and Emma, and I had failed to save them. But this time, I would not let this girl suffer the same fate. Langston ordered his men to search the stables. They turned everything upside down, kicked over bales of hay. I saw Clementine stir under the blankets, preparing to run. But there was no escape. They had blocked every path. I knew I had to do something, even if it was the last thing I ever did. I knocked over a bin of grain on purpose, the noise making all three of them turn. Clementine took the opportunity to slip out from under the blanket and hide behind the bin. Langston roared, lashing me with a piece of the reins, the pain shooting up my shoulder. But I had endured worse. "Hit an old man," I said, looking him straight in the eye. Just what I expect from a cop preying on children. He was furious, raising the reins again, but one of his men called out, "Chief, we found this." I held my breath thinking they had found Clementine, but no, it was just an old photograph, me, Sarah, and Emma, taken 30 years ago. Langston tore the photograph in half, his voice mocking. "Well, this old man had a family. Couldn't protect them, could he, Thatcher?" His words were like a knife to my heart. The old pain rose, but I held it in. Clementine was depending on me. I saw her move silently toward the back door of the stables. She was smart, looking for an escape, but she was also signaling me. Fingers touching palms, a language I didn't understand. I just knew she was trying to say something important. Langston noticed my gaze and turned toward the back door. He drew his gun and advanced on Clementine. There was no time to hesitate. I grabbed the pitchfork and swung it, hitting Langston in the back of the head. He fell, his gun flying. The other two men aimed their guns at me, but Clementine was already out, running toward the creek. A bullet flew past her head, splintering the wood. I lunged forward and grabbed the shooter's arm, causing the shot to miss. Langston stood, blood streaming from his forehead, his face twisted with rage. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Thatcher," he snarled. "I'm going to make you watch her die." He revealed the horrifying truth. Clementine was the only witness to her family's murder, the house fires that covered up the blackmail. I trembled with rage. "How many people?" I asked. "How many families have you killed?" He shrugged, as if it were all business. "Some people don't listen." He aimed his gun at me, intending to kill me. But then, the sound of hooves echoed in the distance, getting closer. Langston paled. Through the back door, I saw Clementine holding a piece of mirror, reflecting the sunlight, sending a signal. She wasn't running. She was luring them into a trap. The Texas Rangers arrived, led by Captain Ezra Whitmore. They surrounded the stables, guns pointed at Langston and his men. Whitmore announced that they were under arrest for murder and extortion. Langston panicked, grabbed me by the neck, and pressed the gun to my temple. "Let me go, or this old man dies." But I was no longer a frightened recluse. Clementine had given me something to fight for. I elbowed Langston in the ribs, breaking the hold. Gunfire rang out, dust and smoke filled the air. I crawled toward the pitchfork, my heart racing, my vision blurring. Langston lunged for the back door, intending to take Clementine hostage. I threw myself at him, grabbing his legs. We wrestled, and he was on top of me, choking me. "You'll die for nothing, old man," he screamed. But he was wrong. I was not dying in vain. I was dying to save a little girl, to give her a future. With the last of my strength, I grabbed the pitchfork and stabbed it into Langston's chest. He fell, bleeding, his eyes wide with shock. "You killed me," he whispered. "Yeah," I whispered. "I did." I lay on my back, staring up at the ceiling of the stable, my breathing slowing. The gunfire had stopped, and I heard Whitmore's voice giving orders to his men. Clementine was safe, protected by the rangers. She wasn't just a victim, she was a warrior, luring criminals into a trap. I smiled, a sense of peace filling me. I hadn't saved Sarah and Emma, but I had saved Clementine. She ran over, knelt beside me, and placed her small hand on my cheek. Her eyes were wet with tears, but bright with hope. She gestured, her fingers moving quickly, saying something I couldn't understand, but I could feel her gratitude. I whispered to Whitmore, "She has no one. Take care of her." He nodded, promising to find a good home for Clementine. I looked up at the hill where Sarah and Emma were buried. "Bury me there," I said, "next to my wife and daughter." Clementine gestured further, and Whitmore translated. "She said she looked after your family graves, kept them clean." A tear rolled down my cheek. This girl, despite losing everything, had shown kindness to strangers. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Clementine's note. On the back she wrote, "Thank you for not being afraid of me. Mom said there are angels that look like humans. I think you are an angel." I closed my eyes, and the pain faded, replaced by warmth. I was no longer alone. Clementine had given me a reason to live, if only for one day. And as I took my last breath, I saw Sarah and Emma standing on the hill, smiling at me. "It took too long, Amos," Sarah said softly. "I was home. I am Clementine, an 11-year-old girl who cannot hear or speak, but I see everything. I see the fire that engulfs my house, my mother and brother disappearing in black smoke. I see men with evil smiles, wearing police badges, watching my family burn to death. I run, carrying my fear and the note my mother pressed into my hand before they dragged me away. That note leads me to the farm of Mr. Amos, an old man with eyes as sad as the winter sky. He doesn't know it, but he saved me, not only from those who hunted me, but from the darkness that consumed my heart. I had been wandering for days, my feet burning on the dry ground, my stomach growling with hunger. I couldn't hear the birds or the wind, but I could feel the earth shaking beneath my feet, signaling danger. Those men, Langston and his men, were hunting me. They knew I had seen their crimes, that I was the last witness. I couldn't scream for help, couldn't tell anyone. But my mother had taught me how to signal, how to use a mirror to send signals, how to believe that there were still good people in the world. I clutched the scrap of paper in my hand, the words my mother had written in desperation. "Please help Clementine. The bad guys have taken her mother. She can't hear, can't speak. Don't trust anyone in town. They're coming." I found Mr. Amos's farm one morning, just as the sun was rising. The dusty old barn was the only place I thought I could hide. I was shaking, wondering if the man who lived there was one of the bad guys my mother had warned me about. But I had no choice. I walked in, stood in the middle of the barn, clutching the piece of paper like a last hope. When Mr. Amos appeared, gun in hand, I wasn't afraid. I saw the look in his eyes, not the look of a predator, but the look of someone who had lost everything, like me. I handed him the note, my hand shaking. He read it, and I watched his lips, trying to make out what he might be saying. He lowered the gun and stepped closer, something in his lined face, sympathy perhaps. I knew he understood me, not in the words but in the loneliness in his eyes. We were alike, two lost souls, forgotten by the world. The distant sound of hooves made my heart pound. I took Mr. Amos's hand, felt his bony but warm palm. Through the crack in the stable, I saw them, 3 men, led by Langston, the one with the fake police badge. I recognized him instantly, his face etched in my memory, beside the fire that had burned my family. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was hold Mr. Amos's hand, praying that he would know that I needed him. He moved faster than I thought possible. He pulled up a horse blanket, threw it on the hay, and motioned for me to hide. I ducked under, trying to keep my breathing even, though my heart was pounding. Through the gap in the blanket, I saw Langston enter, his voice, though I couldn't hear it, certainly threatening. Mr. Amos stood there, leaning on his pitchfork, answering calmly, as if he had nothing to hide. I knew he was protecting me, even though he didn't know who I was. They ransacked the stables, kicked up hay, overturned everything. I crouched, trying not to move, but I knew I had to do something. I had been tracking Langston and his men for weeks, leaving clues for their pursuers, the Rangers. I knew they were coming by the mirror signals I sent out every day, but if they didn't come, Amos and I would die. As one of the men approached my hiding place, Mr. Amos knocked over a grain bin, and the noise made all three men turn. I took the opportunity to slip out from under the blanket and run behind the bin. I saw Mr. Amos being beaten by Langston, but he didn't fall. He looked at me, his eyes saying, "Run." But I didn't want to leave him behind. He had chosen to protect me, and I wasn't going to let him fight alone. I hid behind the grain bin and pulled a small mirror from my pocket. Through the back door of the barn, I saw a stream and a fallen log. I ran out there, lay down, and used the mirror to reflect the sunlight, signaling the Rangers. I knew they were coming, but I also knew time was running out. In the barn, Mr. Amos was facing Langston, and I could see him weakening by the minute. I wanted to go back, to help him, but I had to trust in my plan. The sound of hooves echoed, thunderous. I saw dust flying on the main road, and my heart leaped with hope. The Rangers were coming. I kept sending signals, hoping they would see the light in my mirror. When they burst into the stables, led by a tall man with silver hair, I knew I had done the right thing. Langston and his men were surrounded, but he was not giving up. He grabbed Mr. Amos, held a gun to his head, and tried to use him as a hostage. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was watch, tears streaming down my face. Amos, weak as he was, fought. He elbowed Langston, breaking the hold. The gun rang out, and I saw Amos fall, blood pouring from his wound. I ran to him, knelt beside him, and put my hand on his cheek. He smiled, weak but meaningful. He had saved me, and I knew he was going. I gestured, trying to tell him that I thanked him, that he was my angel, like my mother used to say. I took a piece of paper from his pocket, writing on the back, "Thank you for not being afraid of me. Mom said there are angels that look like humans. I think you are an angel." He held the piece of paper, eyes closed, breathing slowing. I held his hand, feeling the last of his warmth leave me. The Rangers took me to the creek where I was safe. They said they would find me a new family, but I just wanted to stay with Mr. Amos a little longer. I picked a bunch of wildflowers and placed them on his chest, as a farewell. He had given me hope, had shown me that even in the darkness there were people willing to fight for others. I will carry the memory of him, of the day he saved me, and how he taught me that kindness can change everything. I, Amos Thatcher, never thought I would face death like this. Not from a disease, but from a man in a police uniform standing in my stable with a cruel smile and a gun pointed at me. Deputy Sheriff Wade Langston, a demon with a badge, had come to hunt little Clementine, and I, a dying old man, was his last stand. But today, I am not just fighting to live. I am fighting for a little girl who gave me a reason to fight. When Langston entered the stable, I knew he was no good. He had the eyes of a predator, his voice as sweet as a winter wind. He said he was looking for a little girl, a lost child whose family had been in an accident. But the way he emphasized the word accident made my skin crawl. I glanced at the haystack where Clementine was hiding, and my heart pounded. The girl had trusted me, and I wouldn't let her fall into these men's hands. "There are no children here," I said, leaning on the pitchfork, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm dead busy, no time for visitors." Langston smiled, but there was no warmth in his smile. He ordered his 2 men to search the stables, kicking up hay, overturning things. I saw Clementine huddled under the blankets, trying not to move, and I knew our time was running out. A thin man with cruel eyes sneered, "I heard you were ill, old man. It's a shame you have to die alone." He exchanged glances with Langston, and I understood their intentions. If I didn't hand over Clementine, they would kill me and blame it on a natural death. Anger rose in me, not from fear of death, but from injustice. These men, wearing the insignia of the law, had preyed on an innocent child. I knocked over the grain bin on purpose, the noise making all 3 of them turn. Clementine took the opportunity to sneak out, hiding behind the grain bin. But Langston was not fooled. He lashed me with a piece of rein, the pain shooting up my shoulder, but I had endured worse. "Hit an old man," I said, looking him straight in the eye. Just what I expect from a child predator. He raised his reins in anger, but one of his men called out, holding up an old photograph, me, Sarah, and Emma 30 years ago. Langston tore the photograph in half, his voice mocking, "Failed to protect your family, Thatcher?" His words stabbed me in the heart, but I refused to let them break me. Clementine was depending on me. I saw her move silently toward the back door. She gestured to me, her fingers touching her palms. I didn't understand, but I knew she was trying to say something important. Langston noticed my gaze, drew his gun, and headed for the back door. I didn't have time. I grabbed the pitchfork, swung it, and hit him in the head. He fell, the gun flying. The other two men aimed their guns at me, but Clementine was already out, running toward the creek. A bullet whizzed past her head, splintering the wood. I lunged forward, grabbing the shooter's arm, deflecting the shot. Langston stood, blood streaming down his forehead, his face twisted in rage. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life, Thatcher," he snarled. He revealed the horrifying truth. Clementine had watched her family burn to death, and they wanted to silence her to cover up their blackmail. "How many?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "How many families have you killed?" He shrugged, as if it were only business. He aimed his gun at me, intending to finish me off. But then, the sound of hooves echoed in the distance. Through the back door, I saw Clementine sending a signal with her mirror. She wasn't running away, she was luring them into a trap. The Rangers swarmed in, surrounding the stables. Langston panicked, grabbed me by the neck, held a gun to my head. "Let me go, or this old man dies." But I wasn't afraid. Clementine had given me a reason to live, and I wasn't going to let her down. I elbowed him in the ribs, breaking his hold. The gun went off and I fell, bleeding. But I saw Clementine safe, protected by the Rangers. I had done it. I had saved her. I am Ezra Whitmore, captain of the Texas Rangers, who spent months hunting Wade Langston and his gang, demons wearing police badges, spreading death and fear into innocent families. Today, thanks to an 11-year-old girl named Clementine, we brought them to justice. But this victory does not belong to us alone. It belongs to Amos Thatcher, an old man who gave his last breath to protect a child. We'd been tracking Langston since the Hendersons burned to death in their house. The fires, the missing families, all led to him, the man who masqueraded as a deputy sheriff, blackmailing and killing to silence people. But we'd been short on witnesses until Clementine showed up. She was deaf and mute, but she'd left us clues, mirrored signs that glinted in the sunlight, leading us to every criminal den. And today, her signs had led us to Amos Thatcher's farm. As we rode up, dust was flying on the main road. I saw a flash of light from the creek near the farmhouse, Clementine's signal. I knew she was there, and I knew Langston was there. We surrounded the barn, guns cocked, ready for a confrontation. I entered, my voice thundering. "Wade Langston, you are under arrest for murder, extortion, and a host of other crimes." Langston stood there, gun in hand, next to Amos Thatcher, a gaunt old man with a determined look in his eyes. He smiled, trying to appear confident. "You have no business being here, Whitmore. I'm a deputy federal marshal." I sneered. "Your badge is fake, Langston. The real marshals have been after you since the Hendersons." He panicked, grabbed Amos, and put a gun to his head. "Let me go, or this old man dies." But Amos was not afraid. He looked at me, his voice weak but determined. "Don't negotiate for me, Captain. Do what needs to be done." Those words filled me with respect. Amos, a dying man, had chosen to stand up for justice. Everything exploded. Amos elbowed Langston, breaking the hold. Gunfire exploded. Smoke and dust filled the air. My squad opened fire, taking Langston's two men out in an instant. But Langston was faster than I thought. He lunged for the back door, intending to take Clementine hostage. Amos, weak as he was, lunged at him, grabbed his legs, and pulled him down. They struggled, and I saw Amos, with the last of his strength, stab the pitchfork into Langston's chest. He fell, bleeding, his eyes wide with shock. I knelt beside Amos, who lay on the floor, his breathing shallow. "Easy, man," I said. "We'll help you." But he shook his head. "No help, Captain." "But the girl, is she safe?" I nodded. "She's out in the stream, safe. She led us here." Amos smiled, a peaceful smile. "She has no one," he whispered. "Take care of her." I promised to find a good home for Clementine, and he nodded, closing his eyes. I saw the girl run up and kneel beside him, tears streaming down her face. She gestured, trying to say something, and I translated. "She said she took care of your family graves, kept them clean." Amos cried, a tear rolling down his cheek. I found a wooden box in his house, just as he said, containing 300 gold coins, a family photo, and a letter. I lived 30 years waiting to die. But on my last day, I remembered the meaning of life. Take care of the little girl. She saved my soul. I looked at Clementine, placing the wildflowers on Amos's chest, and I knew she would have a future. We would take her to Silver Creek, to the Parker family, where she would be loved. Justice had been served, but Amos and Clementine had taught me that sometimes the greatest triumph is human kindness. I am Clementine, an 11-year-old girl who cannot hear or speak, but I see goodness, even in the darkest days. Amos Thatcher, the old man who lived alone on the farm, taught me that courage and human connection can heal the deepest wounds. On his last day, I found hope, and he found redemption. We, two lost souls, saved each other. When I ran to Mr. Amos's farm, I had only the note my mother had left me and a shred of faith that there were still good people in the world. My family had been burned to death, and I was being hunted by men with police badges. I was scared, but I wouldn't give up. My mother had said, "Even if you don't listen, even if you don't talk, you still have a heart. Believe in it." I believed, and that led me to Mr. Amos. He welcomed me into the stables, though he had no idea who I was. I saw the pain in his eyes, as if he had lost everything, like me. When Langston and his men arrived, he hid me, even though he was weak and dying. He didn't have to. He could have turned away, left me to face my fate. But he chose to fight, not for himself, but for me. I hid under the covers, my heart pounding. But I was not just a scared little girl. I had been tracking Langston for weeks, leaving signs for the rangers, sending signals with mirrors. When I ran to the creek, I knew I had to keep sending the signal, even though I wanted to go back to help Mr. Amos. I saw him get hit, saw him stand up despite the pain. He was brave, not because he was strong, but because he chose to protect me. When the rangers arrived, I saw Mr. Amos lying down, bleeding. I ran to him, took his hand, and tried to speak in signs that he did not understand. But he understood my gratitude. I wrote on a piece of paper, "Thank you for not being afraid of me. Mom said there are angels that look like humans. I think you are an angel." He smiled, and I knew he had found peace. Amos taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. He lived 30 years alone, grieving the loss of his family. But on his last day, he found meaning in saving me. And I, a girl who had lost everything, learned that human connection can heal. As I placed the wildflowers on his chest, I promised to carry this lesson with me. Kindness can change lives. The rangers took me to Silver Creek, where I would have a new family. I brought with me the old note and a new one. "I am Clementine. I cannot hear your words, but I see your kindness." An angel taught me that sometimes the bravest thing is to trust a stranger. Mr. Amos saved me, and I will live to prove that his kindness was not in vain. We are never truly alone if we dare to reach out.